Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into another one of my shows with my show, William Wallace for America, and me, William Wallace. As you guys know, not only bringing lots of entertaining information and community related stuff, and of course, a lot of politics. And I say that to kind of get to the point. I kind of said that in a kind of a choppy way because, as you all know, one of my favorite things is Second Amendment related things. However, when you watch this interview, you're going to see a lot more than Second Amendment. We're going to bleed in a lot of that, no pun intended here, on this because this person that I'm bringing on, Brian Searcy, thank you for being on today, is going to tell you some things that I can't get out fast enough. So sometimes when I stammer, my brain's working fast. You got to forgive me a little bit. But because I'm excited about one of the main talking points that he's going to talk about tonight, I'll get it out, which is you'll be surprised what gun people really learn and really practice instead of what the narrative is that we just want to shoot people. Brian, does all that sound right to you?
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Well, I'm gonna get it out before we talk about it, so people can know what to expect. Which is a lot of people think that when you are when you're a gun guy or a gun person, you want to just learn how to shoot people. But you're going to talk. One of the things that I know you're going to talk about tonight is how when situational awareness and when you most gun people learn situational awareness, which I'm glad we're going to teach that tonight to people who listen, because when you learn situational awareness, you learn how to avoid gun issues or you learn how to avoid having to use your gun. Is that one of your hot topics?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the term everyday carry for those people that are Second Amendment followers and do carry weapons is, what kind of gun do you carry and all those types of things. And when I talk about everyday carry, I talk about how situational awareness is the ultimate everyday carry. You can be carrying a gun, you can have a knife, you can be trained in martial arts. But if you don't have good situational awareness that you practice on a regular basis, if you don't have well developed habits, behaviors, and a mindset and a process that you practice, and you allow the threat to get so close that you can't utilize any of those skills or any of that training, then all that training and that weapon doesn't do any good. So it all starts with that situational awareness. And like you said, the main focus should be to prevent whatever is happening. One of the 10 critical skills that we teach in our program is humility, knowing that you don't always have to be right. You don't have to win the battle. I say all the time that when you carry a firearm or any type of weapon, or if you're trained to be able to defend yourself and defend others, with that great power comes great responsibility. And I always fall back to the Bruce Lee quote where he talks about how he would much rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And he would be the first person to walk away from something unless he didn't have any other choice.
That's a great analogy because again, when you have a passion to defend yourself and you start learning things, you really learn, like you said, that situational awareness. One of the things I learned in taking gun courses is just that you learn how to be aware of your surroundings so you can escape before you have to defend. But I like that Bruce Lee quote. I've never heard it before. Can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, he would much rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And the thing is, when you have situational awareness and you have training and you are prepared, first off, you don't look like an easy victim. So the chances of you being a victim dramatically go down. But because you are well prepared in situations that could turn into something bad, you're much more likely to walk away, to work at de-escalating the situation than to be one of those people that has bravado, is going to bow their chest and just make the situation worse. Today, we have over 6 million people that carry a gun on a regular basis as a concealed carry or an open carry in certain states. One of the things I am concerned about is not all of those people have done what you've talked about and what you demonstrate with what you do on a regular basis, which is to train with that weapon, to understand how important situational awareness is, and to understand that it's not the solution. It is the last resort, but you have to have that training and those habits and behaviors to be able to use it. I would love for everybody that gets a weapon, gets a concealed carry or an open carry, that they isn't just something where they go to the range once or twice a year and put 50 rounds through a paper target, but once a week they practice drawing that weapon, they practice sighting that weapon, they practice the decisions that they might have to make, because that's 90% of successfully using a weapon to be able to defend yourself or somebody else, is having thought through what those decisions might be. Can I take somebody else's life? And then knowing when you are ready to cross that threshold and make that decision.
And that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because what happens when you teach people situational awareness and you teach them how, if they have to use a weapon or a gun, they're going to have to take somebody's life. Now, by putting that on their conscience in a positive way, might I add, you've impressed upon them that, hey, you have to decide whether you want to take somebody's life. And if the answer is no, then you have to be even more situationally aware on how to get out of a situation, and only practice using the gun in an extreme situation when you really need to. And that's the good thing about law-abiding citizens. And I'm glad you said that. I want to pause for a minute before we go further on this stuff. On this, you have a book, is that correct?
I do. It's called Prepare for the Real World. The World is Not a Safe Place. You can sort of see it over my left shoulder right here.
Prepare for the real world, you said?
Yeah, Prepare for the Real World. The World is Not a Safe Place. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Amazon.com. It basically is a working journal, and it's the foundation. It's the introduction that we have to our program. It outlines what situational awareness is, about how you have to go about learning and developing your habits, behaviors, and your mindset. And in there, we also talk about the 10 critical skills that you need to have. We talk about how what we're focused on is prevention. Today you'll have active shooter drills or all these different drills that go on and may last 30 minutes. We believe at the Paratus Group that actually sets people up for failure, because the actual scenario that, if you unfortunately get in that situation, is not going to be like one of the scenarios you practice.
Right.
So what's more important is for you to have a process where you are continually thinking about what you would do in different scenarios. You're taking those courses of action and putting that into what I call your lizard brain. It's the part of your brain that your body goes to under stress when you're in that
point. Yeah.
In that fight or flight. And then you've thought about it and then taken the practicing that you've done, so that if you ever get into a situation where you absolutely have to respond, you have already thought about what you're going to do, so you're able to execute it. Because going back to Bruce Lee's quote, and why I think it's so foundational, is if you're a gardener in a war and you haven't thought about what you're going to do, you won't be able to do anything, because you're not going to be able to be creative in that situation. You will only be able to be successful if you prepared yourself.
Real quick, your book's at Amazon, and where else?
Barnes and Noble. Those are the two places that most folks have seen it.
Because what I'm doing is, you're going to see here, come across the bottom of our screen, I put a link on there. So while we're talking, that's why I switched subjects real quick, because while we're talking, I want people to be able to see where to get your book. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, and absolutely, like I said, when you're a responsible gun owner, you practice situational awareness, how to get out of a situation. Your book has 10 things, you said, that people need to be made aware of. Let's give those 10 things real quickly. You don't have to go into a lot of detail on them, and people can always get your book to go into more detail, but just to give people an idea of what can be found in it.
Yeah, so actually they're the 10 critical personal skills that you need to be successful in life, that you also need to have to be able to practice situational awareness. Mm-hmm. And the sad thing today is that less than 1 out of 10 people have actually learned and developed these skills. 92% of kids coming out of college have not developed these skills. So these skills, these 10 critical personal skills, are self-awareness. And there's 3 parts to being self-aware. It's knowing what's going on around you, but it's also then knowing what you're capable of doing, so that you don't set yourself up for failure. And then it's that your words and your actions have consequences. You can easily escalate a situation, or you can de-escalate a situation.
That's a good point.
You need to be perceptive. You need to know what's going on around you. You need to understand that, in the United States, it's supposed to be okay to have different perspectives. So you need to know that just because you believe or think one thing and somebody else has a different opinion, that should be okay. We need to get back to that as a foundation of our country. You need
Respect.
to you need to know how to be an active listener. Most people today don't know how to actively listen. And a big reason for that is we spend so much time on our devices and we don't have conversations. You need to learn how to be able to do critical thinking, a lost art today, asking questions, getting different opinions, going back to the fact that people looking and searching out people that have a different perspective so that you can do that critical thinking and continually learn. You need to have learning agility. You have to know that you don't know everything and you should be constantly learning and then evaluating different situations, learning from how you react in that situation, learning from your mistakes, and then adding that into your lizard brain. You need to be decisive. So many people today can't make a decision. There's so many dead squirrels on the road because they couldn't make a decision, right? You
Right.
need to know how to communicate, to be able to de-escalate situations, to be able to talk to other people, to be able to call and make a comprehensive call to 911 if you have to do something like that. But communication is a key thing you have to have. At the Paratus group and in our program, our first responder program, one of the things we talk about is the first step is that you learn to be the first responder, the person that's responsible for your own safety. But then we also talk about how you need to be able to also help take responsibility for your community. And to do that, you have to learn and develop empathy, taking your preparedness and then using it to help others. And then finally, it's something I've already talked about a little bit, and that's humility. You have to be very, very humble, especially if you're somebody that's trained, especially if you're somebody that's carrying a weapon. You've got to be willing to let people get in your face. If you can't de-escalate a situation, you've got to be able to walk away from that situation. You don't always have to be right. You don't use weapons. You don't use your skills to solve problems. You need to be able to walk away. So those are the 10 critical personal skills that are tied in to our situational awareness program.
Brian, are we talking about guns and self-defense, or are we talking about life skills?
It's absolutely yes. See,
That's my point, is that this is what I like for the non-gun owners or the people who adhere to the anti-gun narratives. They don't realize that most gun owners, most responsible gun owners, think this way. We think in terms of self-respect. We think in terms of, how to improve our lives with better communication skills. And I think that society in general has lost that ability. We've become so in tune with our electronic devices and the narratives that we forget some of these basic life skills, and we forget how these basic life skills, the 10 that you just went through, translate to how to improve your life on an everyday basis with the average human population. Is that am I going off too far in the deep end?
no, it is all tied together. See, when I first started this whole process about teaching situational awareness, it was how do you prevent an active shooter situation from happening? And then if you have to respond, especially if you have a weapon, how do you go about doing that? But in 2019, after reading information from the FBI and the Secret Service about all the threats that we face, so those threats are sexual harassment, carjacking, bullying, human trafficking, suicide, all of these threats that we face in our communities today, which, by the way, happen much more frequently than an active shooter event. They all can be prepared when you have, can be prevented when you have situation awareness and these 10 critical personal skills. And then the other critical piece to our program is everything that you and I have talked about so far has been about either our own personal safety or how we help the safety of our communities. But situational awareness is critical when it comes to mental health, to be able to identify things that are going on in somebody's life. If somebody says something that maybe is a suicide ideation, to not only be able to pick up on that, but know what to do about it to get help, and not to succumb to the normalcy bias, which means, William, you might say something that is indicator of that you're thinking of taking your life or doing something dumb, and I pick up on it because I'm perceptive, but I say, well, now William would never do that. So
Right.
I don't act on it. And then you take your own life. That's why it's so critical, situational awareness, to help out with mental health with your friends, your neighbors, your kids. But then the other thing that you absolutely have to have to that situational awareness, you have to have that to be able to be a good leader and a good parent. I say all the time that our most businesses in our country today are overmanaged and underled. People think
Say
that
that again.
manage
I like what
that
you're saying. Say that again.
overmanaged and underled. They think they manage people. You don't manage people, you manage processes, you lead people. And without situation awareness, you can't look at and identify those opportunities to lead the people that you're working with, that you're responsible for. And that dramatically ties into being a parent. If you can't identify the things that are going on in your kid's life and then look for those learning opportunities to instill the habits and behaviors to make them happy and successful, if you is what you do is you wait till they have a behavior that angers you and then you punish them, that is not how you are a good parent. And see, situational awareness is the foundation that empowers people to be able to do all that. And unfortunately, and this isn't my statistic, the Harvard Business Review came out with a statistic that said less than 1 in 7 adults today actually has situational awareness and knows how to practice it.
1 in 7.
Only 1 in 7. That's correct.
And it's not just a tool to be used in self-defense. Situational awareness helps you in a lot of other areas too.
And absolutely, that's why I said it helps with mental health. It helps with that, being a good leader, being a good parent. But then that carries over into everything. When I was a leader in the Air Force, I had traits that I learned to be a good husband, to be a good parent, to make me a good leader in the Air Force, and then vice versa. Things that I learned to be a good leader in the Air Force that I was able to bring into the family. This all ties together. It's not like you go to your business, if you're a business owner or a leader at a business, and you do a great job being a leader in that business, and then you go home and then all of a sudden I don't have to practice it anymore. It all, once you learn it and you practice it, it all ties
Dog, that
together.
kind of thing.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, you're not be, and what you're teaching is being cognizant of your surroundings, cognizant of your situation, cognizant of your life in general, and and taking control of your life is also taking control of your temper, your reactions, and when you apply that to self defense, it not only it makes you more aware of how to avoid situations, but it helps you teach other people in the public. Like when somebody watches you being more aware, and you give them that level of respect, like you talked about a minute ago, you're also teaching them how to have self-respect and be more aware.
Absolutely. And the key, if we can empower the learning of situation awareness to parents and grandparents that are out there today and educate them about how they actually transition that skill to their kids, then 15 years from now, we can take that 1 in 7 that Harvard Business Review says are the number of people that actually have situational awareness, and make that 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 7. Because this has taken 30 to 40 years to get to where we are, and we're not going to be able to fix it overnight. That's why the traditional type training that goes on isn't going to work. By having a human trafficking awareness month or a bullying awareness month or a suicide awareness month has not made any dents or differences in those threats that we face today. As a matter of fact, they're higher today than they ever have been. So it
What's
takes a
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no. So it will take time to do that. And what we talk to in our program to the parents and the grandparents about how they share this with their kids is they look for those learning behaviors. And then it's contagious behaviors. So all of my kids know situational awareness, but I never sat down and lectured them. When they were 5 years old, they'd sit in the seat that I was supposed to sit in. So that was my first opportunity to tell them why dad couldn't sit, so his back wasn't to the door. And then there were more learning opportunities after that. And now all of my kids have some of even better situational awareness than I have.
Well, like I said, when you become more situationally aware of your surroundings, you become more aware of your life in general. And when you teach that to other people, now everybody is taking personal responsibility for their own lives and their own actions and their own surroundings in such a way that it creates a positive vibe, not just for your life, but in our community. Am I kind of guessing right there, or is that
Oh,
something?
that's right on the money. That's why we call our program the first responder program. The goal is for everybody to learn how to be their first responder. I had a situation maybe 6 or 7 months ago. My oldest daughter was buying her first house, and we were driving from south of Denton, Texas, to where her new house was in North Denton, Texas. And we came upon an intersection, and I was about 4 cars back. It was a red light, but I could see that there had been an accident. And light turns green. I pull into the gas station on the other corner, and I get out of my truck, and I asked the other vehicle that was in the accident was a red truck that was sitting in the gas station parking lot, and I asked that driver if he was okay. He was. There was a woman there with her phone, and I said, "Did you dial 911?" She said, "Yes." So she had called 911. I went out in the middle of the intersection. This was a major intersection through downtown Denton, Texas. And there was a car, all 4 doors open, and the people that were in the car all ran off. And that's what the witness told me. But there was debris everywhere. So because I'm trained, because I have situational awareness, and because I have empathy and I want to help, I directed traffic so additional accidents didn't happen. Now, if you ever pay attention to other drivers on the road, there's a lot of drivers that aren't paying attention. And
Really?
I know for a fact, isn't that, yeah. I know for a fact that I kept a number of additional accidents from happening by directing traffic. But here's the long story to the point that you were just making, and why everybody needs to learn to be their own first responder. It took the fire department 35 minutes to arrive at the accident scene, because when the witness called 911, the first thing they asked is anybody injured, and when they said that nobody was injured, then we fell into the queue based on how busy our emergency responders are. And it's not that they didn't want to show up, but the police and the
Yeah,
fire department were already busy doing other things.
they're going someplace where
So
there are injuries.
exactly, they had to prioritize where they were. So that time, that 35 minutes, that's the response window. That's from when something bad happens, no matter what it is, to when an emergency responder can get that. And in that response window, we're the first responder. We have to be prepared to do whatever is necessary to take care of our own safety, the safety of our family, and in this case, the safety of the community.
Now, do you think that being situationally aware, and I don't want to, we're going to move on here in just a minute from that, but do you think that situationally awareness makes you more aware of not just your own personal self being in danger, or those right there immediately in your care, so to speak? Do you think it makes you aware of other crimes that might not affect you?
I absolutely believe, especially again, when it goes into that empathy and knowing what you're capable of doing and thinking through actions that you might take. That's how you help take responsibility for your community. So when I'm walking in parking lots, I'm looking to see if a woman walking through the parking lot is being stopped, or if somebody is paying attention to them. And then I've thought about what I would do if I see that. So those types of things I'm consistently and constantly looking for to be able to help other people that might be in danger.
Right.
Noticing if there's something wrong with somebody's car, in the neighborhood, if somebody who normally remembers to put their garage door at night, they don't put the garage door at night, I'll text them or I'll give them a call so that they can make sure that their home is secure. It's looking and paying attention to all of those things, but then not only paying attention to it, making an actual decision and then taking action to do something about it is how we take that situational awareness and turn it into a tool to help make our communities more safe.
So when you're talking about people in your community, reaching out to help other people, stopping at a red light, neighbors' garage doors open instead of closed, do you ask them if they're a Republican or a Democrat?
No, no,
No?
I
Do you
honestly don't
ask them
care.
if they're liberal, if they're conservative, or anything like that?
I honestly have that never even crosses my mind. I don't care. Obviously, I served our country in the military for 23 years, and we're all Americans.
You didn't
I
ask anybody there whether they're Republican or Democrat.
Oh, I never do. Nope.
So my point is that, thank you for traveling down the road with me, that gun owners, people who want to not only have, self-protection, self-responsibility, and self-awareness to work out for others, you don't care what they are. You're one of the people like me that feels like if we continually find ways to give back to our community, do things to care for our fellow humans, look out for, be responsible for ourselves, but also be a lookout for others, we might be able to not only show compassion on who we are as humans, but be able to cause that ripple effect that this is a way to improve our community by finding those things that unites us.
Absolutely. I have a statistic in a presentation I do as the introduction that talks about in the last 10 years, the amount of divisiveness in our country, and this is from 2019, the amount of divisiveness in our country had grown in 8 years by 204%. I'd say it's even more than that now, but I truly believe that one of the key causes of that is because people today don't have situational awareness and they don't have these 10 critical skills. Again, they've forgotten that it's okay for people to have different perspectives. They don't know how to have conversations. They don't know how to share their views. They don't know how to do critical thinking. So they watch one, news channel, and whatever that news channel says, they never question it. And then that becomes the truth. And then they find out later that that wasn't the truth. And then they become disenfranchised. It's a big snowball that just rolls down the hill.
Right.
And I truly believe that the way we protect our republic is by people learning and developing this critical skill, wanting to be part of the community, taking care of the safety and being responsible for the community, loving this republic that we live in and what it was founded on, and living that in our everyday lives.
I love this because you're saying something that I said in many other ways on a regular basis, is that personal responsibility, is a good way to, now of course make everybody aware, but personal responsibility is a great way to protect our republic, because when we are all personally responsible and we're respectful about for others, and we're using that sense, or that I should that gift, or that talent of being personally responsible, we tend to pass it on to others in such a way that we, of course, like I said, protect our republic. Because it's that giving back that does that.
One of the things that I talk about in our programs, and I've shared.
But
No, absolutely. One of the things that I talk about in our programs, and I've shared with my kids as well, is that um, what our devices and what technology has done today is basically allowed for structural stupidity. There are a lot of people that are very, very smart when it comes to knowing science or technology or math or those types of things. But where they're lacking is they're not intelligent, and they don't understand, and they don't listen to wisdom. They think that because they know the answer because they've read it in a book or they've seen it on the internet. Now they know the answer. They don't need to hear what anybody else says. That's what causes all these problems. And I'm a big proponent. We have it in all of our programs that you never stop learning. Every single time I talk about situational awareness, have a conversation with somebody like yourself, I'm learning something that I'm adding to my toolbox. I like to talk about how in with what I'm doing today. Now I've got 37 years of flying airplanes, leading people, doing training. So I've got a lot of experience.
you're a
Um,
pilot.
a navigator, was a
Okay.
navigator. So I have a lot of experience, but I am always learning. Somebody is always smarter than I am and has something that comes into the knowledge that I pass out in our programs. And there's very little in my program that Brian Searcy created. It's from great people over the last 40 or 50 years that came up with really smart things that I now have tied together with what I learned in the Air Force to be able to convey to people about how you go about learning the habits and behaviors and mindset of situational awareness.
I find a lot of people when I will come up to, not a lot of people, but every so often I'll get a comment. They'll say, "Boy, that really was a dumb question." When you ask this, or sometimes when I ask a question, I go, "Wow, that might sound like a dumb question," but it's not that I don't always know the answer. It's that when I ask other people questions, I might get a unique set of information new information that I actually don't know, or another way to think about a particular topic that I might know about. And by doing that, you not only broaden your horizons, but working with your fellow man, because like you talked about a minute ago, when people are always in tune with their electronic devices, they're missing one very important skill, which is communication with others.
No, absolutely. That goes into that structural stupidity that I talk about, where, somebody asks you a question and they think it's a dumb question because they know the answer. But they have no idea and haven't thought about what perspective is this person have that they're asking me this question. Have they never thought of this before? Do they have a different way that they're looking at it that is different than mine? And this goes back to the fact, because people don't have the 10 critical personal skills, that's when they get upset when people ask questions, because they think everybody should know what they know.
Right.
So, like you, one of the tenets I had as a leader was there's no dumb questions, because oftentimes I was able to learn more about the other person by the question they asked me than a conversation, because it gave me an indication of their level of knowledge on a topic or their perspective. And then the other thing that I would always say is never allow me to say that we've tried that before and it didn't work, so we're not going to do it. I had some bosses that did that, even though I thought I had great ideas. And what I found out over time is that because people change, technology changes,
Mm-hmm.
culture changes, just because it didn't work 2 or 3 years ago doesn't mean that it won't work today. Now, there's a lot of things that are based on science or math or those types of things that you can't change. But especially when it comes to leadership and how to deal with other people, there's always better ways to do it.
You have a group called am I saying this right? The Paratus group?
Paratus group, correct.
Paratus group. What is that anyway?
So Paratus is Latin for prepare. So I founded the Paratus group to travel around the United States to introduce and teach communities, schools, business, and churches situational awareness, but to break away from that traditional training. We don't go in and do an hour training and then supposedly now you have an
Yeah.
situational awareness and you're
I
going to go
see.
out and
Yeah.
yeah. So there's such a thing is called the forgetting curve, which means that if I come in, I have the best presentation on situational awareness. A week later, everybody in that audience would forget about 95 to 98% of what I said because it wasn't reinforced. Because anytime there's learning that takes place, it has to be reinforced. And then it takes 21 days to establish new habits and 90 days to establish new behaviors. So our program has an introduction. It's about an hour long. It educates you on what situational awareness is. It's a process. It's not just something that's written down on a piece of paper. We educate you on all the threats that you face in your communities. We educate you on what the 10 critical personal skills are. And then we uh, have you enroll in a year-long program that starts out with a 90-day micro e-learning content. So you'll get 2 to 4 minutes of content Monday through Friday for that first 90 days, where we're reinforcing what we introduced. What is situational awareness? What is the process you need to practice? And it's a 5-step process we teach that is identify, assess, predict, decide, and act. We remind them of the threats that are going on in the community, because one of the things that we find is a lot of people have no idea the threats that are just on the other side of their street or just on the other side of town. And they don't even know that they're there. And when that happens, it's very, very easy to become a victim. So we educate them on a regular basis of the threats that are going on in our country, and they're dynamically changing every single week.
Threats?
Yeah, so we talk about human trafficking. We talk about bullying. We talk about active shooter. We talk about sexual harassment, sexual assault, suicide, all of these things that go on. We educate parents on why it's important to trust your kids, but follow Ronald Reagan's trust but verify. So know what your kids are looking at on their devices. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents that had said we don't look at the devices at what our kids' devices, and I asked them, do me a favor. Look at what they're seeing on the internet. What are they looking at on their phones? And they would come back to me and tell me that they could not believe what their kids were looking at. Over 90% of kids under the age of 18 have seen pornography on devices. And I had a bank president who took our program who They started taking their kids' devices, and he was responsible to look at the text. So he was looking at the text on his son's phone, and found out that his son was being bullied via text. And the current statistic is that kids under the age of 16 that are bullied online via email or text are 11 times more likely to commit suicide. So what this dad was able to do was to notice or see what was going on with his son and get his son and provide help to his son while he was being bullied.
Without the son even knowing that it was coming.
Fortunately, but that's just it, and unless you have situational awareness and you take the time and the diligence to look at those things, I pray that parents, when they follow that trust or verify, they look at those devices and there's nothing going on. They're not being groomed by a predator for human trafficking online, which 92% of human trafficking is done online today. They're not being bullied like this bank president's son. They're not looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. They're not watching videos that that the parents don't want them to be looking at. I pray that that's what they find, that there's nothing there. That's one of those things that people go, yeah, see, I don't need to do this because nothing's going on. But the very next day it could start. It's that
human trafficking
diligence.
A minute ago.
Yes.
What do you teach about human trafficking?
So, like I said, there's a human trafficking awareness month and there are organizations that will travel around the United States and provide an hour class to parents and students on what to look for as indicators of somebody that might be grooming you to try and lure you into the human trafficking area. So we talk to parents about not only know what those indicators are, but be perceptive and actually see those, but then know what to do about it. And a lot of times I pick up those types of things, and it's not in my own family, but it's somebody else's family. Then I have to know, what would I do about that? Do I go, if it's somebody that I know, do I go talk to them and say, hey, I noticed this with your son, with your daughter, maybe this is something that you can do. If I don't know who they are, then I have to think about what the next step is. If there's somebody that I know around the community, but I do know somebody that knows them, but it's taking that action and having the empathy and desire to do something about it. And William, there's something out there called the normalcy bias, which means that 80% of the time when we see something as humans that we potentially initially see as there's something wrong or it could potentially be a threat, we rationalize why it's not a threat. We say, yeah, William just said this. William just said that he's thinking about committing suicide, but William would never do that. He's not the kind that would ever do that. So I don't need to worry about that. That's normalcy bias, where if you're actually trained in how to prevent situation or suicide and somebody says that, you automatically start asking questions.
Wow. That's I mean, it sounds, it's interesting because we started out on a gun note, if you will, but we've used skills that people that are concerned about other citizens, i.e. gun owners, which of course we've made that connection that most gun owners are actually more concerned, but we've used skills that are more conservative oriented to help others. And what amazes me is still conservatism gets a bad rap in the media, that they're always, Republicans stole the word conservatism and it's a bad thing. But people don't realize that conservative values, which this, in my opinion, these things we've been talking about fall within that realm of conservative values, which conservative values also apply to people that are more self-reliant, personal responsibility, and believe in self-protection, but also that same skill set falls upon the shoulders of a lot of people who are concerned about others in public. And that's what I think it sounds to me like you're preaching.
Yeah. And unfortunately, what we need to do is provide the learning of this skill, because like I said, there's so many people out there that actually don't have this skill. And I actually read a little bit about you as well before. And I was very interested to see how you went out and you talked to a whole bunch of people and found out that a lot of people, even though they may have political leanings differently than you, they still have a lot of the same. There was a lot of similarity. I got that correct,
Absolutely
right?
right. Right.
So I think when I firmly believe that in our country, we have 70 to 75, maybe today that's where it is, of people that are near the middle.
Oh,
Some
I
may
love it.
lean to
Yeah,
the right,
you're singing my
some
tune.
may some may lean to the left, and then you've got the extremes on the outside that's all anybody hears about. If we take those 70 to 75% and we empower them with the ability to have empathy, humility, to think critically, to be able to understand perspective, to be perceptive, to be able to communicate and to make decisions, and then want to help what's going on our communities, and we then remember that the people that we have elected to go to Washington
Right.
D.C. or for here in Texas to Austin, Texas, or in Denton, Texas, to be our quote politicians. And I use the term politician because there's a difference between politicians and leaders. Leaders want to solve problems. There are very, very good politicians that are also leaders, but there's a lot of professional politicians that don't want to solve problems and think that the American people work for them. We need to take that 70 to 75% of the people that love this country, that love this republic, empower them with the necessary tools so that
Absolutely.
we can take back the responsibility for our own country and remind those that we do elect that they work for us. Um,
Absolutely.
and we want them to do what the things to make our country stronger.
It still amazes me. Like I said, and thank you for reading up on me. I appreciate that because it is one of my favorite things to say is that we don't realize how much more we have in common than not. And what has happened is, the one issue voting issues or the narratives that have been used by the far right and the far left, that 10 or 20% of our country to divide us up, it makes us not realize that we're more alike than not. And when we start talking about things like personal responsibility, people would be surprised because when I knocked on every door, like you read up on, and I listened to people, I was shocked to hear how many people that were Democrats that said, "Oh, well, I'm a liberal Democrat," or I've always voted Democrat. And we start talking on the issues that we have in common. It always surprised me how many even Democrats are believers in personal responsibility, self-reliance, self-defense, helping other people in such a way that you put party aside. And when you can do that and you can work well and you can work with others using those 10 things that you mentioned in your book that we talked about here in this interview, and you apply those things to your daily life with other people, we not only bring more people together on all the things that we have in common, we bring people together on solutions and solve real problems instead of being distracted by the narratives. And the things that we agree on might be smaller in number, ideologically speaking, they can solve a lot more problems than they can chasing the narratives.
Well, it's narratives, and then what I see being done is we just deal with the symptoms, right? We
Exactly.
don't deal with the actual problem. So going back to Second Amendment and guns, you know, guns are inanimate objects. They can't pull the trigger themselves. It's
Right.
all of the other things that go behind using that as a weapon, whether it's for good or it's for bad. So no matter what we do, if people want to get rid of guns, it's not going to solve the problem. Solving the problem is doing what you and I just talked about, is empowering everybody with the same skills that people had 30 and 40 years ago, when kids would go to school with rifles unlocked in the back of their
Right.
truck because
On
they
the back
knew
of
it
the
was going to be safe. Right. So um, but it's that mentality where we now all want to take care of one another versus walking around lives with blinders on. I've got a picture in one of my slides of a guy trout fishing up in Alaska. He's holding this big rainbow trout, and right behind him is a brown bear getting ready to eat him. It's because, and that it's the epitome of what people do today. They're only focused on what's absolutely important to them right in front of them, and they have no idea what's going on around them. They don't even take the time out to look at what's going on around them, and that's what we've got to change.
And if he was situationally aware, he'd throw that bear a fish.
Exactly. Exactly.
So he wouldn't be the dinner. That's amazing. Human trafficking, you mentioned that earlier, and I know I asked you earlier, but again, do you do a lot of talking about that?
Yeah. So the human trafficking cycle, it starts out obviously with somebody that becomes a victim. And then somebody has to want to demand that victim. And then there's the predators that are out there. And then what we have with nonprofits, they're out there trying to rescue those those boys and girls that are being human trafficked. Now, there's great nonprofits out there today that go to try to rescue the kids and then provide help to those kids when they do get rescued. But there's very few nonprofits that are really working to educate parents to keep their kids from being victims.
Hmm.
So at the Paratus group, I've partnered with Voices Against Trafficking. And the focus here is to go across the United States and speak to groups of parents and educate them on situational awareness, with human trafficking being one of those threats, so they can educate their kids on how to be situationally aware, but then to be able to also look for those indicators if their kids are depressed or they're angry, whatever the case may be, because these predators that are online, that's what they're doing. They're pretending to be the same age as these kids. They're looking for that way in. The kid's upset with his parents because his parents won't give him something. His parents are not paying enough attention to him. And those predators work their way in. They find that little nugget and they get those kids to travel hundreds of miles to meet them. And then those kids are now in a human trafficking situation. Not too long ago, we had a 16-year-old girl taken at a Mavs game, a Dallas Mavericks game.
Wow.
She was in the human trafficking arena for 11 days. Now, fortunately, there was a lot of great work that was done. They were able to find out where she was and rescue her, and her parents had a great role in that. But I have to wonder if her parents had done a better job educating her on the threats that were out there and how to deal with those threats and what decisions to make, if that could have potentially kept her from being a victim, because that's what we want at the Paratus group. We want to prevent people from being victims. When you're prepared, when you know what to look for, what actions to take, not only are you much less likely to be a victim because people are looking for the easy victim, but if something bad starts to happen, you can't remove yourself from that area. You're going to know what to do about it because you know what you're capable of doing and you've already thought about it.
And you teach that at the Paratus group.
Yeah. So in our program, again, it starts with that introduction, and then people enroll in our learning management system and they get that 90 days of reinforcement. And then for the next 9 months, because this is a perishable skill, they get a piece of content once a week to continually remind them to continue to practice their situational awareness and to educate them on the changing threats that are going on.
Unbelievable. Well, when you teach this, are you well, let me go back a few steps. In other words, the the self reliance and the self awareness that you're teaching before, you're able to transfer that over into not only helping them watch out for the human traffickers, but you're doing it in a way that does it help the children of those scenarios too?
Yeah. So we're not only educating the parents, we're educating kids if they take the program, but the goal is for the parents to learn it. So then as their 5-year-old become a 6-year-old, they start teaching their kids situational awareness, educating them about the threats, what they need to do out there. And we're not talking about trying to put fear into our kids. What we're trying to do is put preparation into our kids, because that's what overcomes the fear. And that is what keeps them from being a victim.
But
And
Paul, you know what you're talking about. What you're really talking about is parenting. You know, I mean, I'm not saying it to be, Captain Obvious. I'm saying that because all too often in society today, parents are getting caught up in the electronic devices to give to their kids, and they're not teaching their kids things that we were taught 30, 40, 50 years ago. 30, 40, 50 years ago, I think that children and parenting was transferred to children more regularly through good parenting skills than it is today. Today it's let's give them something to do so they don't bother me.
So I've got a couple points to that. And it started by hearing parents and adults complain about millennials and Generation Z, that they're lazy, they can't do this, they can't do that. Those were all symptoms. If you go and look at the cause, the problem, it's because they don't have well-developed personal skills. Nobody taught that to them. About 30 years ago, the parents and grandparents of today stopped learning that skill. And then when they didn't learn it, everybody expected them to learn it in school. You don't learn it in school, learn it in the business. Don't learn it in the business. I think I mentioned 92% of high school kids don't have, when they graduate from high school, have not developed the necessary personal skills, the 10 critical skills that I talk about to be successful. But the parents today, I agree with you. They don't have the skills to be able to do that, to be able to communicate. Technology has been a bane to that. It has
Let me
only made it
clarify that.
worse.
Let me clear that for both of us. We're not saying that parents aren't capable to have the skills, or that all parents don't have the skills. It's that many parents rely on technology to be the babysitter instead of being active in teaching them this kind of personal responsibility.
But that is a big part of it. But where I come from, and my thought process and the philosophy of the Paratus group, is that there are a lot of parents that don't have these skills. They have not well developed the 10 critical personal skills. They don't know what situational awareness is. They don't know how to look for those learning opportunities. So instead of complaining about bad parenting and all these things that are going on, and maybe, the devices absolutely have a play in that, let's empower them with the skills so that they can learn these skills, and then they can be that good role model and be able to look for those learning opportunities with their kids. Give them the necessary skills and empower them to be able to do that. And one of the things that I've seen, when people learn situational awareness, they learn the 10 critical skills, they start paying attention to what's going on around them, they start checking on what their kids are doing, they start looking for these learning opportunities, they actually start using those devices more as a tool like they were intended,
Right.
instead of, like you said, that babysitter or something to keep their kids
Right.
occupied so they can go off and do what they want. And I firmly believe when that happens, we go back to how it was 30, 40 years ago, and you have a more nuclear family that's a much happier family, a much healthier family. And that is how we're going to turn around what's going on in our republic. I firmly believe that.
I think that children like two things here. That when you always hear how children like discipline, that children crave, and I don't mean this in a weird way to say they crave discipline, but children need discipline. I had always learned that when children are being disciplined, and I don't mean spanking. I'm not advocating for any form of discipline other than to correct them when they're doing something wrong, is where I'm going with that. That children, respect that correction of when they do something wrong. Children kind of consciously know when they're doing something wrong. So when a parent is correcting them in a positive way, they're correcting them, they're teaching them, hey, you did this wrong, and there are going to be repercussions for that. That child then learns how to not only autocorrect, but that child learns skills. The same way that you're talking about self-reliance, protection, being aware. When you teach children that, children want to know how to be safe. Children crave the knowledge it takes to survive. So when a parent teaches them that, their children are going to naturally gravitate to their family, to their parents, to their nuclear family that's created when you're always teaching your child things, and you're especially self-awareness. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and the words that I usually use are guidance and looking for those learning opportunities. As your kids are doing something, instead of saying, "Hey, you're doing this wrong," or discipline them for doing something wrong, you come in and say, "Hey, I saw what you were doing there. This is the better way to do it. This is the way that you should do it." change that bad behavior into the behavior that you want them to have. It's very similar, and it's a very simple analogy. Some people like it, some people don't, but it's the same as raising my German short-haired pointer puppy. If he does something
Wait,
wrong, and
you have German Shepherd puppy?
I do,
Oh, okay. Go ahead. We'll talk about that later.
um, um, if every time he does something wrong is all I do is punish him, I'm not teaching him the behavior that I want him to have. So very rarely does he ever get punished. 99% of the time, we take that behavior he's doing and turn it into the behavior we want him to do. That's what parents need to do, but you have to have patience and you have to look for those learning opportunities. And unfortunately, because parents don't have situational awareness or these skills, what they do is they parent based on their stress level, right? They give their kids the devices to hopefully keep them busy, but then they get bored, then they start acting up, then they start doing things. The parents don't do anything about it. The parents don't do anything about it until it gets to a point that the parents get really angry and they can't take it anymore. And then they punish the kid. The kid gets the attention, but that's not the kind of attention that young man or young woman needs. They need that immediate input as to how to do things. And that's what our kids are looking for from us. They're looking for that love, they're looking for that attention, and they're looking for that guidance. But you have to have the necessary tools to be able to do that. And that's what, I'm excited about with our program. Not only does it make people more safe, but it empowers people to do the things that we were just talking about.
We're going to wrap up here in a minute, and it's perfect timing because I'm circling back here. In the beginning, we started this out talking about Second Amendment and talking about situational awareness to be able to protect yourself in a personal defense type situation. And then we, and recapping here, one thing that I always like to say is, when you going through gun training, I learned more life skills on avoiding dangerous situations and how to be personally aware, which gave me another sense, if you will, an additional sense that made me more aware of what I was doing in my own life. Being taking that personal responsibility and being aware of how that affects others. And by doing that, I've always used those same skills to teach my children in life. But by doing that, I've learned also that it makes a better society. And as we circle back to this, I think that what we've shown here is that gun skills, personal responsibility skills that you learn in gun training are something that are also applied in life. And they also crisscross with conservative values of self-responsibility. And those are the things that empower us as people, not and help us get back to our communities, but also build a family and raise children that are self-reliant.
Absolutely. And that's what the mission of the Paratus group is, to travel around the United States and educate parents, speaking engagements, to be able to do just that. And some of our greatest successes are getting these programs to parents that learn these skills, that then transfer that skill to their kids, and then their kids actually use situational awareness. When they get that hair in the back of the neck or they gut feeling, they take action and they keep themselves from being victims. I have so many stories of how that has actually taken place.
Are those in the book?
No, they're not in the book. A number of them are in our presentations. The book is a working journal. And actually, from people that have read the book, that's where I've gotten feedback and emails and some things about a number of these stories. Some are from close friends, but some are just, information that I get from people that have taken our program or that have read the book.
I love it. Well, Brian, tell me something. I always like to ask people, one of my questions for my show is, what unites us as Americans? What unites us?
For me, it's my faith in God and in Jesus Christ. That's what unites me with my family, and I believe with our community, and that's what sets the moral compass for our country. You don't have to believe in God to have that compass, to have that ability to have that moral understanding. But I think that is one of the things that does unite us.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Brian, are there anything? Did I not ask you some things that maybe there's something you want to get out?
No, we covered a lot of great stuff. If people want to get in touch with me, they can email me at Brian, that's Brian, at Paratus, Paratus.group. And our website is www.paratus.group.
Awesome. Any final parting words?
No, our mission is to get out there and educate, like I said, parents in the community to learn and develop this skill so that they can pass it on to their kids. So those of you that are out there listening, that if you care about your community, if you care about your family, and you would like to have somebody from the Paratus group or have me come out and speak to your church, speak to your school district, help the team members at your business, talk to the PTA, talk to just, groups in your community about how to learn and develop this skill, please contact us.
Awesome. Brian, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hold you on with another question off air after in the broadcast. But I want to thank you very much for your time. And I appreciate you being on here. I hope, we've shown some people that by being person responsible for themselves and teaching that person responsibility, we not only help raise children who are more independent, but a community that's more self-reliant and solving problems instead of following narratives that divide us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Thank you, Brian. Have a great night. Everybody else, please, you'll be not only if you're watching it where you're watching it, but you can find it on Facebook, Rumble, Cloud Hub, and this audio of this video will be on all podcast apps. Please, it'd mean a lot to me, and I know Brian too. If you'd share the interview with a friend that you think might be interested, let them know you got something you want, our content you think was important to you, for them to watch. Thank you so much. Have a great night.